It's me, Aileen. And I'm here with my friends Vijay and Julia. They are among two of the smartest technologists that I know, product people, and also great humans. So it's very unusual. I've never actually interviewed a couple before. So this is a really cool special because you've just got this like crazy AI technology frontier leader power couple.
You're blowing our cover already.
All right, so let's first start about how you met. How did it go down? And this is pre-AI, is that correct?
This was pre-AI.
Okay.
But we did meet online, I guess appropriately. There was a bug in the app, so even though we knew a ton of people in common and had worked at the same company, it only showed that we both liked this organization called Code 2040, which I don't know if anyone in here is from there, but it's a nonprofit that helps people that are college students that are underrepresented break into tech. And I thought that was pretty cool that you liked that nonprofit, and that's how we initially connected.
And wait, where were you working at the time, Julia?
I was at Coursera.
Okay.
I was doing my own startup.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were kind of like a humble startup founder?
Yeah. I think I paid for dinner. I don't even remember now.
Okay. And then talk a little bit about your career transitions. When did AI start to be something that you thought like, oh, this is something I could really embrace in my career, and it became part of your work?
Yeah, for me, I'll start. Years ago, I worked at YouTube, and I remember, like every early YouTube employee, the very first video I saw on YouTube was a video of a cat. It was, Steve Chen's cat, which was like this really fat tabby cat he had in his loft, and I thought like it was just a magical time watching like 20 videos of his cat in the course of like 10 minutes. But it's hard to believe now, like cats were actually one of the biggest things on YouTube for a long time in the early days. And I remember like a conversation with our first product manager, Mary Rose Dunton, about the categories we should have at the top of the site, because we had sports, we had music videos, and then we had pets. But we really should have split up like cats and dogs into separate categories, because each one of those was so big compared to everything else. And the real key moment for us was realizing that because of some early pioneers in this area, Fei-Fei Li, Andrew Ng, others that had like a real conviction and courage about using machine learning to do something that hadn't been tried before, we learned that you could actually take all the thumbnails of all the videos ever uploaded to YouTube, train it on a scale of model that no one had ever tried before, and the model could actually pick up on its own what a cat was. It would understand from looking at all these thumbnails, a cat is an animal, it has like 4 legs, it walks around, it can identify all these different interesting videos with cats in them that we never even realized were on the site before. So for all of us at YouTube, I think that was a really key moment in how we're going to learn about the world around us, how we're going to discover great content, how it's going to really power the future of how we engage with content from that point on.
How many years ago was that?
That was probably 10 years ago that we really started to take off.
All right.
Yeah, and for me, so I started at Coursera the month the company launched, when there was 10 people at the company, and I was hired by Andrew Ng and Daphne Kohler, 2 of the godparents of AI. And it really was always part of the vision of like how the company could evolve and how AI could be used to transform education. But it was really just the vision. Like it didn't actually make sense to try to build in that direction, given the business model and given where the technology was at the time. So for me, it was always a question of that it was going to happen. The question was when. And then when ChatGPT launched, it was very clear that the when is now, and that things were going to move very quickly.
Well, okay, so let's talk about, like, in between when ChatGPT launched and you're being at Coursera, you left to start Uplimit. So maybe can you talk a little bit about why you did that? What does Uplimit do?
So I started Uplimit towards the end of the pandemic. It was when Zoom schools were all over the news, and everyone was talking about how horrible online education was. And I kept on thinking, like, there has to be a better way to do this. Like, the world needs a way to scalably teach people online, a cost-effective way to do so, and our existing solutions weren't working at the level they needed to. And so I started to think, how can we do this better? And the 2 big things were changing were how people engaged online socially, and then how AI could be used to begin to create new types of experiences for the learner and new capabilities for the instructors that would allow real teaching and learning at scale. And that's when I teamed up with my co-founder, who is probably somewhere in the room, Saurabh Bahaj, who is an early Coursera engineer and then had gone on to Google Brain. And we started iterating on what is this next generation of online learning and how do we make it work at scale.
Awesome. Okay, and then at some point you joined Scale AI.
Yeah. At Scale, we're about an 8-year-old startup, but we're now like one of the biggest private AI companies out there, one of the fastest growing. When we first started, our CEO, Alex Wang, who started it when he was still at MIT, he really understood the value of data that played in training AI models, and just finding like the right bits of quality data can make a huge dramatic improvement in the ability of a self-driving car to get on the road, or ability of robots to do really important work for humans. So we ended up 3 years ago when I joined Scale, one of our best research partners was a lab called OpenAI that wasn't as well known as it is today. And we ended up partnering with them on some of the techniques to do this for language, for human language. That ended up being released as ChatGPT over the end of that year. And ever since then, it's
When you say partners, what does that mean?
Yeah, so there's a paper that came out called InstructGPT that laid out this technique of how humans could play a really key role in encouraging the model to give better, more insightful, more instructful answers to the sort of requests that humans need models to do. Up to that point, we'd trained really large models, but we didn't really task them with doing things that were important for human beings to use them. And so that was kind of a key revolution in the field. And a lot of smart researchers at OpenAI that pioneered this technique. But ever since then, we are now using AI for all these applied areas that we didn't imagine before. So we're using it in education to help build more personalized learning journeys. We're using it in healthcare to build personalized medicine. It's all these ways of connecting AI to the human experience that's really pushing the field forward today.
And wait, what's the role that, just to clarify, what is the role that Scale plays? Because you've got the model companies. How does Scale fit into working with clients to use AI?
Yeah, a lot's changing today with the rise of agents. So, everyone knows that there's all of this huge institutional knowledge that are in these healthcare systems or in these manufacturing companies that have been built up over years of people doing this work and understanding really deeply what it means to do this work. Translating that institutional knowledge into the way that an AI system can actually do tasks on behalf of a human and do it pretty reliably in a way that humans still have oversight over how that work's being done is still a pretty tricky challenge. And so we often get brought in where people are using pretty sophisticated models like OpenAI's new reasoning models, but they want it to try to accomplish really difficult checks and supply chain disruption or other things that are important right now. Okay,
all right, that's great. So let's go back to, I guess, I mentioned in the previous panel, Toby from Shopify had just laid down the law about no new hires, you have to prove that AI can't do the job, use it internally, use it externally. So talk a little bit, because you're both at basically AI native companies, how are you using it internally in very different ways than if we all work at an older company, we'd be like, wow, I can't believe you're doing that.
Yes, so it's changed how we thought about building the company. We're early stage, we're hiring a lot of people, but we're also being very thoughtful about what functions we're hiring for. And so, as an example, an SDR team, sales development team, who are normally right out of school, helping to bring in new customers, that's a place where we think we can use technology to solve rather than building out a big team. And so we've challenged our sales and marketing team to think about how you use technology to solve that function using agents rather than building a big team there. There's other places where it's really more about augmentation, and I actually would think, I think that's across the entire company. So every team, every function is using AI to gain new superpowers, whether it's on the engineering side, using tools like Cursor that help them be a lot more productive, or on the marketing side.
Have you been measuring the impact of Cursor, productivity? One portfolio company CEO that we work with said, I had everyone in engineering adopt Cursor, and we're seeing 50% productivity gains on coding time. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense. We're not measuring it, but we know that it's significant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ways you see this impact is when new engineers start at Scale and lots of other companies. The time to that first commit making it into production is becoming much, much faster than it was a long time ago. And I used to work at Apple before Scale, where it would be years before you'd see any of your code actually used on people's phones when you start. So actually, having people feel that they can make code an environment where they can build better, better testing, make it more reliable. That's something that AI is helping engineers do their work better rather than just replacing engineers.
And actually, the whole ethos of company building has changed. Whereas before, how you would evaluate your success as an entrepreneur is how much you've raised or how many people you have in your company. And those no longer are the metrics that entrepreneurs are using. It's really how much revenue have you produced with how small of a team.
Yeah.
And there's a website that we were sharing around at our company the other day that's the Lean Startup Leaderboard, looking at how far companies have gotten with how few people. And that's really what companies are taking pride in.
Okay, so that leaps us forward a little bit to, I think, given there's a perfect storm between economic uncertainty, potential economic rocky times ahead, AI, mandate on no hiring. So what jobs will there be in the future? What do you think is safe knowing what you know about AI?
Yeah, humans are leveraging their knowledge in new ways, and they're kind of moving up the stack to more strategic thinking about what businesses should be doing. So a great example of this is everyone knows supply chains are going to be totally rethought over the course of the next couple of years, across international borders, even within this country. How do you get parts from one part to another? Rather than humans just doing a lot of legwork to try to figure out, like, oh, can I go to this supplier and ask them questions directly? Humans are kind of moving up the stack and doing strategic planning exercises today to think through, as a business, over the next 3 years, what are the risks that I need to stay ahead of? Can I ask like an OpenAI deep research or a Gemini model, to forecast that for me and maybe write out like a pretty comprehensive report and then summarize that, so as a C-suite team, we can all come together and have a really good wargaming exercise or other ways to think about the future. So that's a way in which AI is helping people move up towards more strategic thinking rather than focusing on just the lower level details.
I also think there's so many areas where there's still a lot of scarcity. Like even thinking about education and the number of people that are able to pursue a college degree or across the globe. And I think where AI can come in is thinking about how we take these problems that have been somewhat intractable and make it so that that scarcity issue is no longer there, where every learner can have support, where an incredible instructor can reach thousands or tens of thousands instead of 20. I think there's huge problems that, like, as a society, we need to solve, and if we can focus that energy there's opportunity and there's jobs.
So maybe that's a good pivot too. You've rolled out a lot of new AI features just even in the past week. Can you talk a little bit about what you've rolled out and how you're seeing the adoption and how it's changing how people are learning?
Yeah, so last week we made an announcement. We've rolled out a suite of AI agents focused on a lot of the areas that L&D is focused on. So skill building agents with role plays and interactive exercises where learners are getting personalized feedback, course manager agents that are analyzing the data, pulling out subsets of learners that are struggling, drafting individual interventions, and then the human is pressing send and it's going out to their Slack or Teams account, and then teaching assistant agents. And then we're actually taking that further. One of the announcements was that this summer we're going to launch a fully autonomous agent on the course management side, so that as you're going through an experience, the agent is analyzing what you're doing and how you're progressing. So maybe you asked a really great question in that live session. The agent will follow up with you afterwards and say, terrific question, here's more context on it, or here's a role play to help you practice that question that you asked. And it'll create something that's specific for you in the modality that will work given your learning objectives, and you'll be able to learn and progress. And so it's, and what we're seeing is sort of twofold. One is around efficiency and being able to scale these programs and reach more people. But then the other one is really around efficacy. And some of that is about scaling humans. So actually allowing more people to have an experience that has a human touch involved, where those great instructors are scaled in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's one of the products that you rolled out maybe a year or two ago is one called Nudgy. What does Nudgy do?
So Nudgy follows up with you when you need a little nudge, whether it's to complete an assignment or to join a class, or now Nudgy's getting a lot deeper as it gets autonomous, where it's noticing that you struggled in a role play, that you didn't understand a concept in an open-ended assignment, and providing you the support when you need it.
That's who doesn't need Nudgy in their life?
And that's exciting for me because I know it's at the cutting edge of what research shows is possible with AI, because as we've been building agents, they have all these powerful capabilities to use tools and to do reasoning, but memory is really kind of the final frontier for agents, being able to do things a month from now or 2 months from now and nudge you to take an action. That's kind of like the new thing that researchers are still focusing on, so it's great to see Julia and others roll that out.
So can you paint a picture, because you're so deep into being able to leverage AI to build products, you see how people are using them, you see like hard problems in healthcare that are being potentially solved by AI. Roll the tape forward for us a year or two. It's just been 2 years since ChatGPT. What does 2 years from now look like in terms of our daily lives, our work lives?
Yeah, we're definitely pushing the field forward in terms of what human oversight of AI looks like and what sort of roles we're all going to play in training these models. For example, 3 years ago when we did a lot of work to make the models better, a lot of that might be like computer vision tests, like the cat example. Anyone in the world can figure out what a cat is if you've ever seen a cat before. Today, we do a lot of work around the country with contributors that are helping push the models to the frontier of what they're possible. And that work, 12% of that work today that we do is done by PhDs. Over 40%, they have a medical degree or a legal degree in their field. It's really people at the top tier of their fields that are needed in order to take us to the frontier of what's possible. But that also means like the amount of oversight we need of using a model in a medical situation is dramatically changing. We need doctors to be able to say, this is a good way to use a model, in order to talk about diabetes to a patient. But if you're going to talk to someone about juvenile diabetes, these are the additional things you need to incorporate into how you talk about that, how you talk about what a lifestyle intervention might look like. So that level of like medical oversight is something we're seeing in that field. We're seeing that in the legal field and other areas as well. And we're kind of rethinking how humans need to interact with the technology.
So are you saying the investment is going in now to get the models to a place where the advice from a bot a year from now for someone with a very specific problem will be very good?
Yeah, but you'll still need humans to oversee how that advice is being given. And so explaining the reasoning of the model, explaining all the tools that were used in order to come up with that answer, it's still really important to present that to a medical doctor or a legal professional so that they can exert that oversight.
Okay.
So to that question, I think how most people think about it right now is around efficiency, but how I think it really is going to play out is much more profound into the actual nature of work. So there was a study that came out recently from Ethan Mollick, and it was looking at how teams perform with AI, and how individuals perform with AI. And what they found was that teams with AI performed the best, but then the surprising result was that individuals with AI performed better than teams without AI. And so we know that there's a huge benefit to having teams. It allows you to have experts. It allows you to have cross-functional expertise within the room to solve problems in creative ways. But what does it mean if you can have an individual that's using AI that can be more effective than a team? And it starts getting into questions about how our organizations are structured and why we have different teams and what the function is. And so I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface in terms of how it could shift how we work and how work is structured and what organizations look like to sort of manage that.
So does that mean potentially in the future, instead of having a whole team doing something, it could be one person with AI?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, a little scary. You have kids. What will you encourage your kids to study so they actually can get a job someday and be able to navigate our future effectively?
Yeah. Well, I think it actually starts with human skills, and a lot of the things that you learn in preschool, which is where our youngest is. I think it's about relationships and connection. I think it's about having a moral compass, things that actually AI won't ever be able to do. And I think those are the types of humans and kids that we need to bring into this world to manage one that's going to be a combination of humans and a digital workforce.
One of the things we've seen with companies that are winning with AI, and this is true of education companies as well, is it's kind of like an F1 race where it's not the most important thing to have the fastest car out of the gate at the flag. It's actually more important to have the team that's working together that knows, like, when the driver says he needs to box and then you get the wheels on the car and you get back on the road, you communicate effectively. So learning how to use AI together in a collaborative environment is one of the things that I think humans need to learn. We need to learn in college. We need to learn how to do it in group projects and then hopefully bring that to the workforce too.
If you had to make a list of products to play with for our audience to make sure that they're familiar with, they incorporate them in their daily life, what would be on the cheat sheet?
So I would actually just start with ChatGPT and start asking random questions like, can I, and these are questions I ask, should I wear a patterned dress on stage? Is that okay? ChatGPT approved. So, you can just start asking questions. What should I post for our hype post on LinkedIn? And it had a great idea about blurring an image and writing coming soon. Like, just start asking the questions that you're working on in your day-to-day life, in your day-to-day job, and start seeing what is it like to have an AI thought partner, an AI intern that is doing some of the work for you, that's bouncing off ideas, And then you start building intuition, and you start realizing other areas that it can help you. But just start with a little curiosity, and it doesn't have to be serious, and it doesn't have to rethink your whole job or anything like that. It can be just about the pattern of your dress.
We do a lot of overly ambitious cooking. Like we have the Ottolenghi cookbook at home, and there are a lot of the ingredients there that I have no idea what they are. So using ChatGPT to do an overly ambitious recipe is a great way to get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We love learning from you. We love using your products. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.